Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome to the video. I hope everybody's day is going great. Mine is, and we have a really cool video today. We are going to be talking about the biggest mistakes of Season 1 Overwatch League. So we're going to be going through all the teams, all the players, the coaches, whoever it may be. If they made a massive mistake throughout the season, they're probably going to be on this list, and we're going to talk about it. Also, there has obviously been a ton of mistakes from every single player to every single team throughout the season, but I am choosing the biggest in my opinion. The ones that teams collapsed under, the reasons why they ended up failing at the end of the season, or why they were crap for the majority of the season. So if you guys are excited for this video, be sure to drop a like on it. Comment down below. Let me know if you guys agree with my list, who you think I might have missed out on. And last but not least, guys, if you are new around here and you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel. I upload videos every single day. Now, let's go ahead and hop into it. So starting off with the first biggest mistake of the Overwatch League, and actually this one makes sense to be number one because we are going all the way back to the very beginning. It's the Florida Mayhem coming into the Overwatch League way understaffed and with such a low number of players on their roster. So Florida Mayhem, they finished the season rank 11 out of 12 teams, 7-33 overall with a map score of 42, 120, and 5 draws. Not the best showing for a team that was expected to at the very least, be middle of the pack or lower middle of the pack. And even some people expected them to be pretty damn good, considering they were comprised of the best European players and pretty much one of the best European teams of all time, Misfits. So let's go all the way back to stage 1, which definitely was one of their most disastrous stages. Especially if we factor in those expectations we had for the Florida Mayhem. They were the only team to come in with only 6 players, and they were the only team to come in with only 1 coach. That is why they went 1-9 in the first stage. I promise you guys, if they had ran more tryouts, picked up more coaches, analysts, and had a more developed team going into the first stage, they would have picked up more than 1 game. Because they do have some decently talented players. But some of the players aren't that talented, like Zebusai, Zupe, and Swoosh. They're just not that good. They really aren't. They don't stand up to all the other players in the Overwatch League. So if they had second options at the beginning of the stage, maybe like Awesome Guy, if he was there, he could have helped. And they definitely learned their lesson. As you can see, at the end of the season, they now have 9 players on their roster. They've picked up a handful of coaches. I think they have 4 now. Off the top of my head, they definitely have 3. One being Mineral, one being R2DER, and then, yeah, who they got from the San Francisco Shock's Academy team. And I remember seeing at the beginning of the season when the roster's locked, Florida Mayhem, they only had 6 players. I said this was going to be a problem, and because of it, I put them way low on my power rankings going into the season. And it really just is unrealistic to expect the same 6 players to be able to flex and play every single match throughout the entire season and go up against other teams who have 10, 12 players on their roster who can flex so much. If somebody's sick, someone else can come in. What if someone is sick? Who's going to sub in? Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind, and I said it so much. Then what if somebody burns out, man? This is the Overwatch League. You're playing for 6 months every single day, 6 to 8 hours, even more. For a team like Florida Mayhem who was struggling, they probably put extra hours in, and this really took a burden on Logix. During stage 2, Logix started playing amazing. I guarantee he was grinding so hard and he wanted to be so good. But then in stage 3, what happened? Logix got burned out and he couldn't play anymore. And boom, stage 2 was their best performance. Going into stage 3, they struggled. And then stage 4 was also their worst performance, 1-9 tied with the first stage. So, as I said, they learned their lesson, and Overwatch League also learned their lesson too. They have added a rule that all teams going into season 2 must have at a minimum 8 players on their roster. So there we go, guys. That is one of the first biggest mistakes in the Overwatch League. Let's now move on over to the Houston Outlaws, because this one also came early on into the season around stage 2. So the Houston Outlaws, they did pretty good. You know, getting 7th place, that isn't bad. It's not the best, but you're not the Florida Mayhem sitting at 11th and 7-33. So the Houston Outlaws, they finished the season ranked 7, 22-18 overall, 94-77, and 2 draws on the maps, plus 17. And we're only 2 wins behind the Philadelphia Fusion, London Spitfire, and 3 behind the Los Angeles Gladiators. Honestly, all the way up to the 3rd seed, the Boston Uprising, they were only 4 games behind. they could have easily made the playoffs. Just a couple more wins and they would have been in. So you're probably wondering what their mistake was. Well, as I said, it goes back to stage 2 and 3. Let's first talk about their stage 1 success though. They went 7-3, finished second overall in the regular season. They lost and got third in the playoffs, but they had a 7-3 record going into stage 2. It was great. So stage 1 was the rise of Junkrat. He got a huge buff, and then we also started seeing a lot of Widowmaker. And Linkser early on was definitely one of the best Widowmakers in the league. Jake was obviously insane at Junkrat. So because of this, they had incredible success in stage 1. But when we got to stage 2, things changed a little bit and Tracer became really dominant. Junkrat got a couple nerfs, and all of a sudden, Houston Outlaws, they went from 7-3 to a 5-5 performance. Instead of finishing second in the stage, they finished 7th. And it got even worse going into stage 3. They finished 4-6 at rank 9. This knocked them really low into the standings and needed them to have an incredible stage 4 to make the playoffs, which honestly they almost did. They went 6-4, 2 more wins in the last stage, and even almost matching their best in stage 1, 7-3. Now I haven't told you guys the exact problem, but I did hint at it. It was Tracer in stages 2 and 3. So at the beginning of this season, looking at the Houston Outlaws roster, they had Clockwork. We all expected him to be that big guy to step up to the Tracer role and be able to carry when needed. Well, when the door was knocked on, he never answered. He ran away, and he really wasn't that great a Tracer. So then they put Jake on Tracer. Let's be honest, Jake didn't do the best, and they kept trying to force him on Tracer. And this was during the trade window in stage 2. They could have easily traded or picked up a Tracer. Instead, they went for Arhan, a guy who really never played Tracer and didn't even get to the Overwatch League till stage 4, and they kept forcing Jake on it. And honestly, throughout the season, Jake never even got that good at Tracer. He was decent in stage 4 when they needed to play it, but in stage 3 and stage 2, when Tracer was definitely the pick, and teams like Boston Uprising, they had Striker carrying them, teams like New York Excelsior, they had Sabiolbi carrying them. Those were the best teams in stage 3, and it was because of Tracer. They even made the huge mistake of swapping Linkser onto Tracer a few times. Not even a few times, a decent amount. They were forcing Linkser on Tracer, and this left them without their flex god who could play hit scan, projectile, really whatever you needed, or Widowmaker in the really dominant Widowmaker meta. So this was a huge mistake by the Houston Outlaws. And honestly, I felt like this was the biggest downfall of the Houston Outlaws this season. If they would have just had a really good Tracer during stage 2 and 3, they easily could have won 2, 3, 4 more matches, maybe even more. Because we seen them in stage 1 when Tracer wasn't dominant and they were able to play whatever they wanted. They were great. So that was the biggest downfall of the Houston Outlaws, and that's why they're on this list. I guess we're kind of on a timeline right now because we're moving into stage 3/stage 4 now, because the next team we're talking about is the Seoul Dynasty, and they really messed up in between stage 3 and stage 4. You guys know what I'm talking about. Swapping Ryu Jahong onto main tank. This was devastating for them. In stage 1, Seoul Dynasty missed the playoffs not even by a game. They were tied with the Houston Outlaws and the London Spitfire, who were both 7-3 at 7-3. Moving on to stage 2, they were also 7-3, tied with Philadelphia Fusion, who was 7-3 and made it over them. Then in stage 3, they only missed the playoffs by 1 game. They were 5-5. Los Angeles Gladiators were 6-4. So up until stage 3, they were definitely a top 6 team. They were ranked in the top 6, even top 4. So going into stage 4, all Seoul Dynasty had to do was keep up the average play, and they would have been into the playoffs 100%. But for some reason, they decided, hey, let's not play Cookie or Miro, who have been our main tanks all season long, and let's swap our best player historically and pretty much in season 1 besides Fleta onto main tank, a role he's never played in his life. Let's see how that goes. Well, transitioning into stage 4, it didn't go very well because Seoul Dynasty ended up finishing the stage 10th overall at 3-7. By far their worst stage, I mean massively their worst stage, and ended up missing the playoffs just like Houston Outlaws by 2 matches. All they had to do was win 2 and they would have been in. Kept up the average play, they would have made it, but they made this stupid mistake, and I don't even know why. I don't know what happened. Miro was playing horrible, Kuki was decent. I don't think they needed to do that, and if they didn't, they would have made it into the playoffs 100%. That killed their stage 4 performance. They basically threw all the practice out for the entire season just to swap their main tank and flex support. It made no sense. So for that reason, Seoul Dynasty has to make this list. And now again, transitioning later into the season, we're talking playoffs now. We're going to look at the LA Gladiators, and as soon as I said that, I know all of you guys are already thinking Fisher, Fisher. What on earth happened to the LA Gladiators and Fisher? I honestly can't answer that question for you, but we can look at it and we can talk about it. So going into the playoffs, the LA Gladiators, they were ranked 4th, and they're going up against the 5th seed, the London Spitfire, a team that they have beaten throughout the season every single time. They were 3-0 leading up to this match, and they were by far the favorites, especially because the London Spitfire were slumping extremely hard in stages 3 and 4. Now real quick, let's go back a little bit. Looking at stage 1, the Los Angeles Gladiators were ranked 8, finishing with a 4-6 record overall. Pretty much bottom half of the teams. But then they acquired Fisher from the London Spitfire, and they immediately started doing better, finishing at 6-4 in stage 2, then 6-4 once again in stage 4, and then lastly stage 1, 9-1, where they peaked going into the playoffs, where they had an MVP caliber player in Fisher absolutely carrying them. But for some reason, it was announced that the Los Angeles Gladiators were not going to run Fisher for the rest of the playoffs. Again, we do not know the exact reason. I believe Fisher got a little arrogant. His ego was too high. He was raging and complaining, and the coaches, they had to do something about it. But we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss the mistake, which was either Fisher's fault, LA Gladiators' fault, whoever's fault it was. This was the downfall of the Los Angeles Gladiators. I personally think that they possibly could have beat the London Spitfire. Obviously, the London Spitfire, something clicked in that second set, and then they just went on a tear and won the World Championship. But if, I don't know, if Fisher was there, you never know what would have happened. Maybe he could have shut down Gesture, who was really popping off. Anything could have happened, but this was definitely the downfall of the Los Angeles Gladiators. Nothing could have hurt them more throughout the entire season. Picking up the best player you can possibly get, then benching him when it matters the most, is your downfall 100%. So that's why the LA Gladiators are on here. Now moving on to the next mistake. Now this one's a little difficult to talk about, and I don't even know if it's like a mistake or just unfortunate circumstances, but we're talking about the New York Excelsior and their playoff performance. So leading up to the playoffs, we all knew New York Excelsior, they're going to win it all, right? Or at least we figured that they would be in the final. They didn't even make it to the final. They lost in their very first match against the Philadelphia Fusion, who was the 6th seed. And look at the difference of their records. The New York Excelsior were 34-6 at the end of the regular season, and the Philadelphia Fusion were 24-16. They won 10 more games and like 40 more maps. That's insane. They were the favorites, but for some reason they didn't come out on top. And I'm here to tell you that the main reason they didn't come out on top was because they were not able to adapt to the new meta in the playoffs. Pretty much throughout the entire regular season of the Overwatch League, Dive was meta. Like, maybe it wasn't the best comp, but you really could run it hard. Like Tracer Genji 24/7, Tracer Pharah, Tracer just Tracer. And this is always going to lead back to Sabiolbi. But the fact was, he was one of the best Tracers in the league, and at most times he was the best one, and he put his team on his back. Yeah, sure, Jonak was there, he did great. Pine was there, he did great. They all did great. But at the end of the day, Sabiolbi really did a ton for them. And going into the stage 4, everybody assumed with Brigitte coming in that Tracer wasn't going to be played that much. But actually, teams were still playing her a decent amount. And this helped the New York Excelsior get by a little bit. They played her a ton. They didn't finish at the top of the stage though. They actually lost this one to the LA Valiant, and they didn't have the best record. They lost to the Los Angeles Gladiators and the Valiant in the regular season of stage 4. Going into the playoffs though, a lot of people were assuming that they were sandbagging. I honestly wasn't too sure about it. I thought they might not be as good as they were before. And unlike in stage 4, in the playoffs, teams really were not running Tracer that much. Maybe like 10 to 25% of the time, but maximum that. And looking at the New York Excelsior, they ran Tracer the most. Sabiolbi literally only played Tracer besides maybe 15-20% on Widowmaker and random stuff. And him not being able to flex more to heroes like Brigitte and Hanzo really hurt the New York Excelsior, and I do believe them missing that firepower that they had all in the regular season from Sabiolbi hurt them in the end and was their biggest downfall. Now obviously there were other reasons why New York Excelsior did not make it out of the first round, but this is the biggest one, and as I said at the beginning, it was kind of hard to talk about this one as it wasn't really a mistake. I guess it was because they couldn't adapt. You guys let me know down below what you think about it, and also this is going to be the end of my list. I only wanted to put these 5 on here because they were actual mistakes that like the teams and management and players made. As for, you know, something like Dream Casper and Boston Uprising, I guess that's a mistake. but I didn't know if I want to talk about this. You guys want me to do like a version where I talk more about like, XQC, Dallas Fuel, Kai, Dream Casper, controversial things like that? I can definitely do that. Well, I mean, guess Fisher's on this list, but that's a little less. Like, that was controversial, but that really was the downfall of them, and I had to put that on this list. So I guess you guys let me know down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like on it, subscribe to my channel for more daily Overwatch League content, and I'm out of here, guys. Peace.